Where would Godzilla fall in terms of the Pacific Rim International Danger Scale? While the Monsterverse is home to some of the most powerful titans on the surface of the planet, this is not the only franchise to sport some incredibly powerful kaijus. Pacific Rim has even developed an international danger scaling system in order to assess the threat levels posed by various kaiju. So then, this poses the question, if our Godzilla from the Monsterverse were to be measured against this scale, where exactly would he fall? Well, today, Heralds of the Titans, let's talk about this subject. There are two ways to approach scaling Godzilla. First, we can transport Godzilla into the Pacific Rim universe and compare him to the kaijus of this reality, or we can take this scale and apply it to the Monsterverse. For this video, we'll be doing both, but first, let's cover exactly how the International Danger Scale classifications function. As of now, there are 6 known categories. Category 1 poses little to no threat and is only 100 feet or so in size. Typically, Category 1 kaiju are docile until threatened, and tend to only attack in self-defense. But even though Godzilla is relatively passive, he is far beyond a Category 1 no matter how we approach it. Moving on, Category 2 kaiju are minor threats that usually work in packs or groups, while Category 3s are the most common kaiju in Pacific Rim. Some of these kaiju have biological augmentations or attacks, and the rise of the Category 3 calls for immediate action. In the Pacific Rim franchise, examples of kaiju being Category 3 would be Yamarashi, Knifehead, and Pagonia, as these are the upper limits of a Category 3 classification. Yamarashi was established to be around 2,500 tons and was responsible for attacking Los Angeles, California in 2017, before being taken down by Raleigh and Yancey Beckett. Knifehead was capable of ripping an entire arm off of a Jaeger and gave the pilots a significant challenge. Right now, we don't know how well Godzilla would fare against a group of Jaegers. However, we do know that Godzilla weighs in upwards of 80,000 tons. If 2,500 tons is the upper classification of a Category 3, and these kaiju are able to contend with Jaegers, then we know Godzilla has no problem outclassing any Category 3. If this scale was applied to the Monsterverse though, then the description we need to analyze is as follows. Deemed as a threat to most places, this category is the most common, and a threat to many. Now with the additional biological weapons, Category 3 kaiju are a potential threat, and action needs to be taken immediately. While action certainly must be taken if Godzilla were to ever rampage across a city, it seems relatively certain that the King of the Monsters exceeds a mere Category 3 classification. So now, let us examine Category 4. Category 4 kaiju are not just defined by their sizes, which are in excess of 3,000 tons, but they are also assessed based on their intelligence level. These kaiju are often smarter than the average Category 3, and are capable of much more advanced thoughts, including the ability to strategize or to plan attacks effectively. For example, the kaiju known as Leatherback was able to employ guerrilla warfare, doing so in order to make up for his size. While he was certainly a behemoth in terms of his weight, his intellect is what made him such a threat to the Jaegers that were sent to stop him. He figured out that he was able to use hit and run tactics, and they were particularly effective against the Jaeger pilots, and was able to maneuver much more effectively than the other kaiju counterparts. Category 4s are said to be a massive threat to Jaegers, and the battle plan has to be severely amended in order to accommodate a Category 4. Speaking of Godzilla's intelligence, we know he's at least a Category 4, as it's comparable to Leatherback, if not far more. And if Godzilla were to be transported into Pacific Rim, he would be far smarter than nearly any of the kaiju. Godzilla is capable of planning his attacks and understanding threat levels just like we see in Leatherback, even going so far as to sabotage Apex Cybernetics because he understood the looming threat of Mechagodzilla. Very few kaiju in the Pacific Rim universe are shown to be this smart, and the ones that are classified as at least Category 4. Some reports indicate that Godzilla is extremely intelligent, able to form alliances with not only humans, but other kaiju and titans as well. It's believed that Godzilla is the most intelligent of all of the Gojira, implementing planning and strategy into many of his fights. In fact, many consider Godzilla's intelligence to be one of the most underrated aspects of the kaiju, and a testament to just how long the King of the Monsters has persisted. In the Monsterverse, Godzilla is intelligent, but there are other contenders that rival this intelligence. The Kong, for example, are able to create an array of different weaponry, They can harness the energy of the Hollow Earth via artificial means and can communicate across species. Right now it seems that Kongs are most likely the most intelligent titans in the monsterverse, and perhaps Mothra, but this is not to discount the intelligence of Godzilla. Regardless of which universe you use this to measure, Godzilla seems to fall into at least a category 4, even if not for his intelligence, but his sheer size. The kaiju we mentioned earlier, Leatherback, is a beast, but he only weighs in around 3,000 tons compared to Godzilla's 80 tons. So now we get into a category 5, and it's becoming increasingly clear that if Godzilla were to jump into the Pacific Rim universe, his weight and size alone would put him into a league of his own. If he were to make the leap into this reality, then he would instantly become one of the single most dangerous threats that the Pacific Rim universe has ever faced, and we don't currently know if there is anything in Pacific Rim that can stand up to Godzilla. Realistically, Godzilla could be in a category of over 100 plus. He single-handedly surpasses any category 5 and category 6 threats and creates his own new system. Based on the Pacific Rim threats, our Godzilla is easily into the double if not triple digit danger categories, but in the monsterverse, he is also surrounded by other capable titans. This brings us to the interesting question of what happens when these category descriptions are applied to the monsterverse and we switch the scales. Even though Godzilla has eventually come out on top of these titans like Ghidorah and Kong and even the Mutos, they were able to give him a considerable challenge, and Godzilla has nearly been killed on several occasions. For these reasons, it makes more sense that from here on out, we set aside the idea of Godzilla hopping into the Pacific Rim universe, and we instead attempt to create a scale for the monsterverse. Godzilla's intelligence, in conjunction with his sheer size, would still place him in a category 4 if this scale was applied to the monsterverse. But now, we are left to wonder if he can graduate into a category 5. Since we are no longer scaling 1-to-1 with Pacific Rim, the data gets much foggier. Category 5 kaiju are defined as immediate threats. The first of the Category 5s in Pacific Rim was able to solo 2 Jaegers and their pilots. At this time, Slattern was defined as the most dangerous threat that the Pacific Rim Defense Force had ever seen, and his high toxicity and intelligence are what put him into the Category 5. We know that Godzilla is radioactive. With this additional power is probably enough to classify him as a Category 5 alone, but this brings up the question of Godzilla's respective forms. Each of Godzilla's new forms vary in power level, and when we first meet him in 2014, it was questionable as to whether or not he could be a Category 5. Now though, he has only been growing astronomically in power and abilities. Godzilla has saturated himself with much more radiation courtesy of several atomic bombs and various power plants. Godzilla from 10 years ago may not have been a Category 5, but his current form most certainly is. This leaves us with just one more category, the Category 6. And to be defined in simple words, this is the world-ending capable kaiju. The only criteria to measure Godzilla against now is whether or not he is a world-ending threat. And surprisingly, we say no for one simple reason. In the latest trailer for the new Empire, we see Godzilla emerging with a brand new form, saturated in bright pink energy. However, Godzilla emerges from ice, indicating that round 1 against the Frost Titan Shimo may not have gone his way. Recent reports seem to suggest that Shimo may have actually been responsible for the first Ice Age, and that with Scar King, she may be attempting to bring about a second one. This is a world-ending threat, which would make Shimo perhaps the only Category 6 as of right now. And currently, the upper echelon of Godzilla's pink form is unknown. We may also want to put Ghidorah into a Category 6 world ender, as we learned that he was capable of terraforming Earth to his liking if given enough time. But if Shimo is capable to ending all life on Earth, then we would also like to categorize her as a 6. If Godzilla's pink form is strong enough to stand up to Shimo and even exceed her abilities, Godzilla could be a Category 6, if not pushing the thresholds of a Category 7 on the MonsterVerse scale. Depending on what we see in the new Empire, our list could drastically change though. But it's clear that Godzilla is far and away the most powerful kaiju that the Pacific Rim universe would have ever seen by massive margins. And again in the MonsterVerse, he still reigns as the king. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Godzilla's scaling for Pacific Rim in that universe? But now, my friends, we would love to hear what you have to say. What are your thoughts on the ranking of Godzilla? And what category do you think that he would be in? As always, my fellow Heralds of the Titans, thank you so much for stopping by the channel, and I hope you're having a great one.